Today is a very exciting day for all of us here at the Brooklyn DA's office because we're announcing a major initiative that we have been working on for the past year. It's an unprecedented plan. We call it Justice 2020. Now, in the past, while often guided by good intentions and a severe and sincere commitment to public safety, prosecutors did their jobs in ways that contributed to mass incarceration and mass supervision, which disproportionately harmed people of color, destabilized families and communities, and created a sense in many communities that our justice system was heavy-handed and unfair. Justice 2020 is an action plan. It's aimed at changing the culture of this very office in the way that we hold people accountable for criminal behavior in ways that don't overly rely on incarceration or even criminal convictions. It's a comprehensive blueprint of how to reshape and reimagine a prosecutor's office in the 21st century. I believe that here in Brooklyn, we're uniquely situated to lead on this transformative reforms. We have a strong foundation of progressive-minded prosecutors, and we have made incredible gains working with our police department in public safety. We've successfully changed our bail policy, and we've reduced pretrial detention. We've stopped prosecuting most marijuana possession cases. We created an immigration policy that was aimed at protecting people who are low-level offenders from unfair and harsh collateral consequences. And last year, we created a new diversion program here in Brooklyn called Brooklyn Clear that was aimed at providing people who misuse drugs a way of accessing services without requiring them to spend the night in central booking or even come to court. I believe that these changes have moved us in a direction of a fairer and more just system, but I know there's more work to be done. So in the next few minutes, I'll try to explain Justice 2020 to the best of my ability and explain what it's going to mean in terms of the practice of this office. You should have it in front of you. It's also available online. This is a report that summarizes over a year of deliberation by a 70-member launch committee that was co-chaired by Dr. Crew and the Honorable Judge Lippman. The committee was made up of people from all walks of life. We had prosecutors and defense attorneys, reform experts, academics, community leaders. We had members of our police department. We had members of unions and formerly incarcerated persons, clergy, service providers, and many, many more people. They came back with a number of recommendations which we consolidated into 17, which we actually have started to implement already. By the year end of 2020, I intend to make meaningful progress in fulfilling all of these recommendations and creating a model for how a modern and progressive DA's office should operate. So I'm going to jump in and talk about the plan. It's made up of 4 pillars. I'm not going to get into all 17 recommendations. I ask that you read that so you can report on it. But the first and most central principle is reducing incarceration and making jail the alternative. If we're going to be serious about ending mass incarceration, this is the most important principle. Evidence shows that relying on incarceration as an automatic and primary response to crime can undermine public safety by breaking apart families and communities. And it prevents people from pursuing the very things we know that make them safer: education and employment. These are the kind of things that produce public safety, reduce crime, and create strong and healthy communities. We also know that people who are incarcerated come out of prison more likely, not less likely, to commit additional crimes. So we are going to take a different approach. Justice 2020 directs the assistant district attorneys in this office not to take a cookie-cutter approach to public safety or their cases. accountability is not synonymous with punishment. Instead of viewing themselves as case processors with convictions as the main measure of success, prosecutors should think carefully about what they are hoping to achieve and why. We are going to be more thoughtful, and we will be asking ourselves crucial questions at every juncture of a proceeding, such as what are we actually trying to accomplish in this case? What resolution is best for this particular defendant, for this victim, and for our community? Would this intervention actually keep us safer or not? Now, as we go through this, I think ultimately one of the questions will be, is what we're doing here in Brooklyn promoting public trust in our justice system or not? And I think the answer to it is going to be yes. We're going to make criminal convictions and incarceration a last resort. And when we do seek it, we're going to try to minimize excessive sanctions whenever possible. Often, less is more. Oftentimes, prison does not equal public safety. Now, this doesn't mean that this office will never send anyone to prison. I believe that public safety and justice for victims require sometimes that people have to go to prison. But what's different about this approach under Justice 2020 is that before we take an extraordinary step of depriving a person of their freedom, we're going to make sure that we have thought through carefully the needs of that individual, the victim in the community, and whether other things will make more sense, as drug treatment, mental health treatment, and those kind of abilities to take cases away from criminal justice outcomes that equal prison. The ultimate goal here is to promote public safety. And I believe that many of these reforms are actually going to do that. For too long now, we have provided a false narrative to victims that the only way we can keep them safe is by sending someone to jail or prison. The second pillar of Justice 2020 is to engage communities as partners in justice. It means that decision-making should be informed by what communities say they want for their safety and for a just criminal justice system that they can actually put trust in. We hear all voices, but we have to make sure we're paying attention to them, including the voices of victims when we evaluate cases. But to empower community members, we will build neighborhood safety councils and partnerships that will allow people to serve and tell us the values of the communities in terms of their community definition of what safety and justice look like. These voices have to echo in our policies and even on how we handle certain types of cases. We will expand our collaboration with community-based organizations and groups, which will help rebuild the lives of many who are at risk of entering our criminal justice system. And we're going to focus our resources on addressing the underlying conditions that often lead to violence in the first place. Taken together, these two pillars of Justice 2020 represent a significant change to how this office has operated. The third and fourth pillar is about focusing resources on the drivers of violent crime and investing in data and people to drive innovation and reform. We will explore earlier interventions to deter violent crime. We will enhance our prosecution of drivers of violent crime. We're going to enhance our prosecution of gender-based violence. We're going to create a data analysis team to make sure the things we're doing make sense and works. We are going to create an office of professional responsibility to hold assistant district attorneys and myself accountable. We are going to train our assistants in ethical ways of conducting themselves and train our staff in cultural competency so they can better serve their community. And we're going to streamline our cases with better and earlier electronic discovery and move to a vertical prosecution system. We have started some of these to implement many of these recommendations already. Besides the expungement of marijuana convictions, we've recently established a needed hate crimes bureau and a new law enforcement accountability bureau. And we're close to launching our electronic discovery process, which will share with defense attorneys much of the material using cloud-based technology. And we are on our way for revamping our data systems. This is a plan for Brooklyn, but my hope is that the recommendations of Justice 2020 will be adopted in other places. We hope Justice 2020 can serve as a model of a progressive and effective prosecutor's office, and that the impact of what we're doing here in Brooklyn can be felt in other jurisdictions.
There's so much about this that is worth a longer debate, but obviously we don't have time for that today. But the thing that I was most impressed with, and what I want to thank you, District Attorney Gonzalez, for, is highlighting the need for young people and the needs of their communities and the needs that their parents and families have to be able to trust a justice system that essentially understands who they are, what their lives are about, and where they're headed, whether it be through school or through college. The idea of living in a Brooklyn that is just and fair and affords people the opportunity to go through their life without worrying about being incarcerated, unfortunately, and getting a record, or having their lives stymied in some way is critical. So I think this is groundbreaking work. I think you've done an exceptional job at being able to pull it together, and you're right that there may be many other people who will take advantage of this model throughout the country. You're to be commended for that. I wanted to speak to a couple of items that are for me quite essential as an educator. One is places where I see Justice 2020 and the education of students in Brooklyn, or frankly students in the city of New York. There's an intersection there. When I see a hate crime being perpetrated, I see a need for greater education. I see ignorance being combated, if you will, by education, not by incarceration. When I commend you, what I'm commending you for is the stepping into the breach of that and being able, both through your own office, but also through the attorneys in your office, and through these recommendations in 2020, at stepping into that breach and really recognizing that there is a real intentional focus on the education of young people as opposed to the incarceration of young people. That many of the things that we now would call a police person for really calls for deeper instruction, the deeper teaching in a classroom. A second thing that leaps out to me, and one of the reasons that I gladly decided to, along with Judge Lippman, to co-chair this, was the need for preventive measures as opposed to simply waiting until the horse gets out of the barn and we then have to try to figure out what to do with that. That's a different problem set, and the work that you are proposing through the recommendations to engage communities, the neighborhood councils, the organization and the work with civic groups and organizations within the communities, I think is extraordinary and will be tremendously beneficial at being able to serve this cause of justice on the preventative side, as opposed to simply curing it once it's been up and about. I do think that we have a moment in time when, by your leadership and the leadership of this office, we need to take more of a focus on prevention for these issues, and allow for students and young people in the city and in the borough of Brooklyn to enjoy a world in which they are actually going to be taught how to avoid these problems, as opposed to actually stepping into the breach of them. And last, and certainly not least, I think that there is just an overriding issue of how well this has been rolled out and how well it has been thought through by the multiple committees and the various sectors of Brooklyn that you brought together. The fact that I was even on it as an educator and that there were countless other people from all walks of Brooklyn life suggests that this is an omnibus motion. It's a way of being able to really structure and create a strategy within the borough that will serve all segments of the city, all segments of the borough. and allow for this to permeate deeper into the homes and the families and communities of Brooklyn.
Mass incarceration has not kept us safer. In many ways, it makes us less safe by destabilizing individuals and communities. Rikers, the Brooklyn House, which Leah and I have visited together more than once, and other models of mass incarceration are accelerators of human misery. They turn normal human beings into hardened criminals, whether they're there for 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, or 2 years. These are the dehumanizing, violent places that victimize everyone there. My years on the bench have taught me that people can be held accountable for their actions without having to go to prison or to jail. And the real test for DAs and judges and all the players in the criminal justice system is the outcomes for the individuals involved and for society, and not in the number of people who we drag in and out of the criminal justice system each and every day. After years of increases in the numbers of people imprisoned in New York, we have finally begun to see those numbers creeping down, and more than creeping, they're going down strikingly. And this is remarkable, that crime is way down and incarceration is way down at the same time, and that's not always the case in places around the country. In fact, it really is. This is the result of years of hard work on behalf of criminal justice reformers, advocates, and elected officials. Continuing in the right direction requires big change and bold leadership. As Chief Judge, I prided myself in putting bold new ideas on the table for criminal justice reform, because I wasn't constrained by the tough on crime, soft on crime syndrome that elected public officials face. But isn't this really something? That this is what we have today in Justice 2020. Big changes and bold leadership from an elected District Attorney Eric Gonzalez. When our committee convened on the very first day last year of our mission, DA Gonzalez spoke to us and said he wanted to keep Brooklyn safe and also strengthen community trust in the criminal justice system. He asked us to tell him what we thought he should do to achieve those two goals. He told us to think big. He told us not to be limited by what we thought was doable, or worry about whether his office was ready to take on big change. He would take care of that, and he has. So that is exactly what we did. We thought hard about what would be necessary to fulfill the DA's vision. We gave him a set of recommendations, and we met with him to talk about them. And he made a commitment to us on the spot to do his best to fulfill every single one of those recommendations, hopefully by the end of the year 2020. Taken together, these recommendations represent nothing less than a cultural shift in the Brooklyn DA's office and a totally new approach to the job of District Attorney. This new approach is focused away from punishment and from warehousing people. That's what happens around the country in the criminal justice system. We warehouse people. Don't do anybody any good. They sit there. And they become far the worse human beings when they get out. And towards, what we're going towards, is a holistic, community-based response to criminal behavior. I go around the country speaking about criminal justice reform, and I can tell you that no other DA's office in the country has attempted an initiative on the scale of Justice 2020. Some of the recommendations have already been fulfilled, the rest are underway. They are all towards one end, justice. Justice is about safety and accountability and transparency and about the community, and not about conviction rates and punishment, and certainly not about the amount of money in your pocket or the color of your skin. In Eric Gonzalez, we have a DA who uniquely understands how important this new thinking and approach is to the well-being and health of our communities and our system of laws.